Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security Confidential. This is Manoj Tandon, your host, and we are honored to have Rafael Nunez join us today. Rafael is a mentor, a motivational speaker, a veteran, and an accomplished cybersecurity and information security executive and professional. Has many skills in the InfoSec arena with risk mitigation, encryption, vendor collaboration, PCI DSS. Rafael has worked as a senior security architect for Sirius Computer Solutions, also as the IT security manager and principal information security analyst for Lowe's. He is the founder of RAYA Cyber Solutions and co-founder of the Carolina CISO RoundTable. Anything I missed there, Rafael?
No, that was amazing. I'm like, man, that's me. That was good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's you. That's you, and it's a privilege to have you here, and we're really
Thank you for
looking
having me.
forward to this conversation. You know, one of the things, there's a few things. A lot of our listeners we have heard us on past episodes showcase veterans because we support them. We hire a lot of veterans at Dark Rhino, and we want to help people who have sacrificed so much. Get some meaning in the civilian world, if you will. So you have a little bit of that background, and I'm sure there was some adversity there in the Air Force. But you also mentioned as part of your life transition that you faced some adversity, which actually made you a much stronger person. I'm paraphrasing, but share with us a little bit about these two
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. First off, pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Your acknowledgement of veteran sacrifices really tugs at my heart. It's very dear to me as a veteran, as someone who is connected to people still serving, and as connected to people that have served and have given the ultimate sacrifice. So thank you for that. Yeah, as far as setback, that particular setback was losing my job suddenly and becoming unemployed overnight. Um, the reason why that represents such a big shift for me is because the one thing that you fear the most that would happen, if it happens, you feel like, well, if this happened and it's the thing I fear the most and I'm still standing, right? What else have I been hesitant on pursuing? What
Hmm.
else have I been fearing in life that suddenly I'm like, what do I've got to lose? I already lost that one thing I was treasuring so much. So becoming unemployed by default led people reaching out to me, hey Rafael, how can I help, what can I do? And one of those opportunities was some contract roles where I could deliver as a virtual CISO. And suddenly he says, well, Rafael, in order for us to do business together, I'd like for this to be corp to corp. So here I am. Okay, I guess I need an LLC. I guess I need a business name. So all these things happen just by default. I never planned on it. I never planned on having an LLC a few years ago. And one thing led to another, right? It put me in a different frame of mind, in a different billing rate, gave me access to be have a seat at the table with these companies where they were looking at me for advice. I met one of my greatest mentors during that phase and doing work for Anthony Johnson, and just met others that opened the doors for me and allowed me to walk in a light that I hadn't walked in before, or allowed me to see skills that I had sort of suppressed in myself, being the employee and just checking the box of a role in a large organization.
Now, do you think you would have made this transition to being an entrepreneur and independent had you not gotten laid off? Would you have
I don't think so. I don't think so. You know how they say when you're down, the only way is up, right? And I think it was like in my country, Dominican Republic, there's a saying that says necessity teaches more than university. And I think
I
I just
like
saw
that.
myself where I didn't have a choice. I was applying for certain roles, nothing was fitting, and then suddenly it was like, hey, got something for you. And we were going through our savings. My wife was looking at me with tears in her eyes, and we're going to keep the house, that sort of thing. And I just started running, and hustling, and I was really hungry to for self-improvement, for success, for making things happen, providing for my family. I think that catalyst was the unemployment. Without that, I wouldn't have had the business.
So let's contrast this with the other side of that coin. And I know from personal experience in our own family where we've had relatives that have lost their jobs and they were so devastated by it that they went into a downward spiral of a depression, and all kinds of crazy things happened that should never have happened. Heck, it was just a job. But they had such a strong identity to that that it was like someone had died that was close to them when they lost that. When you, our audience listening, would wonder, how do you choose the why in the road that you chose? How do you stay positive in dire circumstances versus it's so easy to be the victim and fall down?
You know, I was always secure in this umbrella of working for the government, being active duty military. Like
Okay.
it's almost, you know how they say, you know, I was even civil service at one point. They say it takes an act of Congress to fire a GS or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that safety net where everything was always going to be okay, suddenly it wasn't. I think I wasn't always positive. I was hopeful, but I wasn't always positive. A lack of options will make you really decisive, right? So a lack of option, right? Decision making is a
Hmm.
gift in itself, and a lack of options leads to better and quicker decisions, right? If anything, you can fail fast quicker. If you're in a team and you got to get over the wall a certain number of times, but you have someone to tap on, you know, when it's their turn and you're exhausted, you know, you may not see your max potential because the moment you get kind of tired, you're like, why am I busting my butt here? Let me just tap on this guy's shoulder. When you look to yourself and you're like, I'm the provider. Yes, my wife works, but I'm the primary provider here. So I don't have the option of resting a couple of days, sleeping on it. You know, the luxury of maybe being depressed. I'm sad. I need someone to talk to. I need a hug. You got to go. So that lack of options is what instilled in me the need to kind of research, connect, stand out there, show up more boldly. Like, yes, I've done this. Yes, this is who I am. Had I had options, a couple of job offers or things like that, I would have just gone back to the corporate world and just falling in line. You know, I wouldn't have been as aggressively. So it sounds like a good story after the fact, but I wasn't always positive. I really wanted to just kind of hunker down and be depressed and succumb to that, and cry, cry to somebody, look for excuses, look for the reasons why me, but didn't have those options.
So what would you tell someone that's gone down on their luck right now and they're trying to lift themselves up and maybe make a career change to cyber, if you will?
I would say that while their situation may be unique because no one knows what they're going through and how they ended up there specifically, what their bloodline is and what their family has put them through, whatever they've been through, someone else has been through and they've overcome, and they are still here. As
That's
long as you
awesome.
are still here, as long as you're on this side of the dirt, you still have all the potential to go.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, you want to be on the right side of the dat dirt. And as long as you're there, and it's very true that no matter how bad your circumstance, I can almost guarantee there's somebody else on this planet that's got it worse.
Absolutely. And we don't always have to wait for those moments of rock bottom to acknowledge the pressure, how precious this life is. You know, I have a couple of friends my age, close in age, maybe 2 years apart, who have gone into cardiac arrest over the last five
Oh
years.
my.
These guys now live fully, live life like, you know, tremendously. They travel, they take time to be present and everything else. And that's their story. But we don't have to wait for those circumstances to shift and acknowledge that the life, how much is available to us, how abundant this life is to make things happen.
Yeah, that's a very cool attitude, and it's really a very positive place to be. And I think, I mean, this is again just my personal opinion and not Dark Rhino's opinion, but my personal opinion is you're going to attract that which you want to become or that you become. So, if you
Agreed.
maintain that mindset, that's there. So speaking of which, one thing that I found interesting in reading a little bit about you was you mentioned this thing called the imposter syndrome. What the heck is that? Sounds really cool, but Can you explain it? What?
Yeah, I do want to empathize with most people because the moment we give something a label, um, the moment we give something a label, we have to acknowledge it because that's gonna resonate with people. People are gonna cling on to that label, and you don't want to be so hardcore that you deprive people of finding that safe haven, right? So like nowadays, procrastination used to be people just say you were lazy, right? So imposter syndrome is this belief where others may acknowledge you as a rock star, but you don't think you're good enough, right? You don't
Okay.
believe the acknowledgments, the accolades you're given. Or if you walked into a role, you've been promoted, you've gotten a certification, you think you're a fraud and that truly somebody must have made a mistake. Sooner or later, somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, time's up, music's up. It's not, you're not, we got you. This is not who you really are. That's how I would describe it. Um,
So can people confuse that with humility or being humble or
to an extent, I think to an extent, being humble at times, actually, yes and no, because sometimes people know how good they are, right? Like, I am a badass, I am this good at this, and it's more like, let me suppress that so I can remain approachable and that I can remain and say, hey, I'm still human, I'm still coachable, I can still receive feedback. That may be different. But rather than just describing imposter syndrome, I think that at times it's the acknowledgement of your work. If you haven't put in the work, imposter syndrome will tap you on the shoulder all day long. It's going to embrace you. It's going to sit right beside you, have coffee with you. But if you can say, wait a minute, the test is based on this one page. I've read everything. I know that one page verbatim. Yes, I can walk into my glory. I can pass this test. I deserve to pass it. I put in the work. If you studied the night before 5 minutes for a 250 question exam, then yes, you should feel like an imposter. You shouldn't even be sitting in for that test.
yeah. So I guess the other question that comes to mind is there anything wrong with believing that you are that good or that you are the best at something or you do have a special
Yeah, you know what I think? I wouldn't say that's wrong. I think what is wrong is to acknowledge a label that you feel describes you and then just use that as that safe haven and remaining there,
ah
right? So understanding what the problem is isn't good enough. You still have to go solve it, right? You
yes.
can't sit back and say, "Oh, we left the back door open." Yeah, that back door, man. Okay, let's go have a drink. No, go put a lock on it. Go close it up. And that's what I think it's the problem. Is that people feel comforted in saying, "Oh, that's what's wrong with me, man. Okay, cholesterol, no problem. Let's go have some fried chicken." You know what I mean? I think that's what it is. That's the crux of most things, right? It's like in knowing isn't good enough, right? We have to tie that to action.
Yeah, and that's and tying it to action sometimes means that, or a lot of times it actually means that you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, get out of that comfort zone. And I find that to be one of the hardest things to instantiate in a human being, to get people comfortable and being uncomfortable and accept that that's a good thing because it motivates you to take action. I don't know if you have any suggestions on how do you actually do that? How do you get off your butt and go change the locks on the back door or go for a walk or go for a run or when it's just easier to deal with the procrastination ninja and just say to heck with it, man.
I think it's understanding that the one thing that one thing you're putting off isn't gonna go away. It's not avoiding things, it's going through things that makes us grow. And like you said, it is going to be painful. You have to understand that discomfort is part of that growth. And going back to the label, I say tying to the label is the fact that if I tell you, hey, boss, I'm going to put together this project, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to revolutionize our entire policy landscape. If your boss says, man, that's amazing, you're a rock star, I may go back with that instant gratification that he acknowledged my idea and just sit in my laurels kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if that boss were to say, don't tell me, shut up, don't tell me, show me, now you got to go to work, and that's what it is that people, again, but back to knowing isn't good enough. People can say, oh my God, what is my life purpose? What's my purpose? What am I meant to do in this world? I wish I could find my purpose. I've taken a skills assessment, blah, blah, blah. Okay, once you find your purpose, it doesn't get any easier. You still have to go work on your purpose,
You're
right?
right.
Whether you're a content creator, a professional, or a superstar basketball player, whatever, you still have to work. So understanding and acknowledging what your purpose is or what the policy is or what needs to be done isn't good enough. So I think that's what it is. It's always marrying ideas, initiative with the action. Those three things have to go together.
I I think that's really good sound advice, and I hope our listeners who are listening can make use of that, because it's important if you're going to have achieve excellence in something. And so let's switch gears a little bit to cybersecurity, if you will, directly. And it's about taking actions. So I'm going to paraphrase. I remember, I can't remember if it was a video or somewhere I read in your background, you mentioned that it can take an entire village to keep your data safe. So first of all, why does it take an entire village? Second part to that, it's a two-part question, is a lot of our audience is in the SMB space, the small medium business space. They're a part of the village. They can't afford the village to keep their data safe, and they need to keep it safe. So how do they do it? Like, what's the path here? So two
Yeah.
parts.
And the part about saying we're all a village is the fact people get asphyxiated into one particular role, whatever that their inclination may be. So for some people, it's no, if I'm not a hacker, I won't be validated as a true cyber guy, right? If I'm not
That's
a SOC
true.
analyst, so it's the understanding that I remember coming up in cyber, people I idolized because they happen to be ethical hackers, and I would try to speak with them about governance, and they're like, Rafael, you're not speaking my. I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know what PCI, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What regulations got govern what? I don't know what certification and accreditation is. Like, oh, wait a minute, we need each other, kind of thing here,
Yeah.
right? So, while one guy may be given the hammer to break in, another guy is gonna, give you that top cover to validate that, do we have the right contract in place that you are able to break that door and somebody's going to pay for it and they're not going to come after us later. So it's that understanding that everybody plays a role. If that's your passion, if that's the one thing you're good at, don't underestimate the potential for impact. Third party risk, auditors, sometimes that stuff sounds unsexy, super necessary
Oh
nowadays,
yeah.
right? And that's what I was driving when I made that comment. ID and access management before was just security administration, create accounts, delete accounts, block accounts,
That's right.
and now it's ID and access management, right? And we have privileged access management solutions and everything. And again, some unsexy to most, to some other guys, is like how clean can I keep my Active Directory? Where can I find potential for lateral move? I mean, so again, it's just that we're all making a sound contribution. You can't have one without the other. It's kind of what I was trying to drive with that comment.
Yeah. And I guess, a follow-on question to that would be, do you think that maybe there's too much compartmentalization in cybersecurity?
100%. When you said small to medium sized business, what occurred to me is that I've been doing consulting for a long time. It's when you speak to a large organization, right, a $40 billion company, you're talking about one discipline, and 8 people show up to the meeting to talk about identity or talk about
Yes.
endpoint protection. When you speak to a small to medium sized company, you have 2 people in the meeting, and one guy owns 3 of those disciplines that I just named.
Yeah.
And that guy is like fierce, and you better know your stuff because he definitely knows his stuff in his
That's
environment,
right.
and he's done it 1,000 ways, and he knows how it works and how it doesn't, right? So down to that, I think so already there we can say one of the biggest constraints is often people. right? It's not always budget. It's often people when it comes to small, medium-sized businesses. So the first thing that comes to mind is that allocation of resources. You only have five, right? So think about it. You're holding in your hand three door locks, but you
Yep.
have a hole. We're looking at 20 doors, right? Where do you put those three locks, right? So how are you using your people? Sometimes you can't do all the sexy correlation stuff, right? And you're not going to have the most fine-tuned SIM because you have one resource that's doing
Right.
threat intel, endpoint protection, DLP, everything else. So that the allocation of resources is probably one of the most important things you can do for your organization without being fearful of. Back in the day, when we talked about managed services, it was like, oh, hell no, nobody in my environment. Are you kidding me? We manage our own stuff. We're not going to give
Right.
access. But nowadays, it's something to be leveraged. You will never beat the SLAs of an MSSP, right?
That's true.
24/7 coverage. Yeah. So yeah,
Or if you
I don't
do,
want
it's
to.
going to come at a huge cost.
100%, 100%. So, and if we're saying that resources are one of the biggest constraints, you need to be wise to prevent, employee burnout, use them effectively, to really, really listen. Hey, look, I'm not being that effective here, or my time is not being spent wisely. Can I spin this up? Yes, please go for it. That guy's sticking around, owning a lot more, making a lot less than somebody else is at a Fortune 40 company. So it's it's best to listen, kind of, give them some rope, be really cognizant of what they've taken on.
So you talked about the infosec professionals, but what about when you said people? But what about the people? How do you bring them into the security pool? The actual employees, they're probably the most underutilized asset in cybersecurity. So how do you bring them into the fold and establish a culture, if you will? So even if you only have 3 locks, it's equivalent to having 10. Maybe not all 20, but you got 10 because you got vigilance.
Yeah, I really like the way that security awareness training is shifting nowadays, where it's more like it's not the gotcha, not the gotcha, and like, lock your door, empty your desk, clear your desk, make sure you classify your emails. It's more like, come into our world, see what we see. Here's the lens of the adversary. Here's how this may affect your personal online transacting, right? Your kids. What does internet access mean in an uncontrolled, unprotected browser and things like that. Because what we're doing is we're creating advocates, right? And we've also shifted from saying no to saying, oh, is that what you want to do? Let me help you go faster, right? I'm right behind you. Those two shifts in training and security calling themselves an enabler, we have a long way to go to be true enablers. But those two shifts are really helping create sensors out there where the average user does say, this doesn't look right. This email, no, I've never talked to this person. Yeah, right. I just got an email from the CEO. And before, people are like, whoa, jackpot. And so I think that shift alone is helping greatly.
Yeah, I think if it would accelerate, it would be even better.
Yes, yes, 100%.
Yeah, because I do. We see it all the time. I mean, you look at, I forget what the statistics said, but 80+% of cyber breaches are due to human error, right? So if you can get
Yeah,
people aware of potential errors, you'll never get to 100%, but potential errors, you might do a lot better.
yeah. You know what, though? 96, whatever that percentage was, 96% of endpoint systems are used by humans. So
That's right.
it's like the problem. You know what I mean? It's like saying, 96 of people that go to a water park will get wet. Like, yes, it's people going to the water parks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, if you tell me there's a potential your car may get wet, now I have to question things. So yes, but is it human error, or is it just human? If we take the error out and we say 96% are caused by humans, well, yes, humans are the primary user, the ones accessing the data, the ones provoking the environment. right? The ones opening and shutting doors.
That's a subtle but very cool mind shift, because I've been using the term human error on this podcast for God knows how long. But it really is to be human. I mean, it's human nature. It is. And you know what occurred to
100%.
me was, from a threat surface or attack surface perspective, as you were speaking, it you look at sales professionals, right? Sales professionals are trying to reach decision makers all the time. And I guess they would be ripe for compromise, because one of the easiest things to do is to send a sales professional an email from a decision maker, and the guy's going to go jackpot, when
Yes.
it's really he's being human or she's being human. So uh, it is. There's a lot of human nature in this, and that's something that's been. I think you look at all the cyber training that goes on out there, whether you're trying to become a SOC analyst or you're studying for your CISSP, a myriad of certifications are available. I don't know of anyone that actually gets into the psychology of the hacker and the human. And that
Agreed.
is the root cause of it, right? And the only place I know that actually does that is US Cyber Command.
You're right. You're right. We forget that again because we're human. You have the careless person. You have the negligent. The negligent person.
Sure.
It's the fact that it's cyber and what is at stake, right? Because again, we can't just say these 5 people. You will be cyber. Put them in a room. Only you can process this data. Only you have internet access. It's everyone, and within everyone, you don't have a chance to just equip and select just the elite, right? Super intelligent, very conscious about. So it's because it's cyber, right? It's because what's at stake. Because ultimately, you still have the guy that is the last one to use the coffee pot and forget, doesn't fill the water and walks out of the break room, right? Oh, or doesn't empty out the pods or whatever. You have Kathy who processes wire transfers, and it's like Kathy processed 15 wire transfers in the last hour. Amazing. But then she's the one getting dinged because she's become so, you know what I mean? She's on cruise control and she's stamping the fraudulent wire. You see what I mean? So it's
Yeah,
like the
I
things you
do.
get, yeah. So again, so sometimes the one thing that makes you great is to your detriment, right? Sometimes it's good to be really loud and speak up for what's right, but sometimes it's good to be quiet. But that quiet person is also the shy one. Hey, you should speak up more often. But so again, we're human, and that same behavior is reflected in our activities online, whether we glance over an email or whether we read it entirely, right? Attention to detail, all that comes through. We can't hang up the human at work and just be the robot cyber person or great, individual contributor.
And I think that was worth the price of admission for this episode for sure. Because uh, people who are listening, especially if you're in a decision making capacity, it's a really important thing. I think a lot of times people think cyber is a bunch of technologies and controls, and because I bought X widget or gadget, whatever it may be, that month, my company is safe. But if you've forgotten about what you're saying, the human part of it, which is how you got here in the first place, you're not going to have a very effective cybersec program. Just won't. That's my opinion. I mean,
100%. 100%. We are ultimately what we want to do and help people do is make informed decisions. That's what it comes down to.
yes, that's a
It's not
term used
about
in healthcare quite a bit. Make
do
an
you, yeah,
inform.
yeah, make an informed decision. It's not about do this, do that. Ultimately, what I want people to do is make an informed decision. I can't train people for every single scenario, right? And every single spoofed email. It's ultimately, can I get people into that trend of making informed decisions? Then I've done my job. And the
That,
humans
that
are the ones who make informed decisions.
and that yeah, not artificial intelligence, real
Yes,
intelligence, right? Which
agreed.
is the flavor of the last 5 years. But that's brilliant. So let's talk about, diving into this, vulnerabilities, right? So cyber threat modeling, vulnerabilities, what to prioritize. Give us some practical advice. How do you go about doing that in a practical manner, right? There's a lot of frameworks. I know there's things like FAIR out there, which is brilliant if you can afford to do it, and if you have the time and the energy and all those things. But how does a company do that in a practical way?
One thing I've been hearing a lot of lately is based on grading vulnerabilities based on exploitability, right? Not
Okay.
on how critical they are to everyone, but how critical they are to you specifically, to your environment, and that gets to knowing your environment. Um, for me, I think it's going to be a little more basic. Here's the disjointness I've seen everywhere when it comes to vulnerability management,
Okay.
and that's the fact that you have three separate teams, right, trying to accomplish vulnerability management. You have compliance saying, hey, we have all these open vulnerabilities. You have security validating and saying, yep, we're vulnerable. We just ran the scan. Here are the vulnerabilities. And then we have engineering receiving the patches, right? And app owners and everybody else saying, okay, this is my list. That disjointness of like, okay, what do I patch first? Did you see my concerns from last week with the list you sent me last week? You sent me 1,000 vulnerabilities last week and you're sending me 1,000 more now, but you haven't responded to my concerns about last week's 1,000 and why I can't patch. And you're piling on
More.
more. So engineering says, yep, we've been dinged with 2,000 vulnerabilities. Security is like, engineering, 2,000 vulnerabilities. And compliance says, hey, our numbers are up, you know? We continue to report accurately. We're now up to 2,000, and it's like, why aren't these three people in a room, right? Understanding what each one needs of each other, right? Because again, I, I can't imagine showing up at a coffee shop every single morning, right? And the guy makes my coffee the wrong way, and I just walk out, but I still pay him and I tip him. I come back the next morning, it's the same reaction. We smile at each other, we greet each other. Coffee's still $3. Yep. Are you still getting the same thing? I am. I walk out. It's just bizarre to me. So for me, rather than focusing on, a particular vulnerability scanner or how to gra- um, how to set criticality or anything like that. Start with your highs, 30 days or anything like that. Creating a framework, it's that disjointness of who owns what and are they talking, comes down to it.
Well, which gets into the whole thing with friction, right? And what you just described are three roles there that should be working together. But depending on the size of the organization, those three roles might be in three different departments, or they might be the same department. They might report to the CIO or the CFO or to some risk manager. As the case may be, how do you lower the friction level? And quite frankly, not get fired. I mean, I've seen situations where the CISO, is in the CIO, is underneath the CIO, and he or she is telling the CIO, dude, this is not going to work. You got to make some changes. And that's their pet program. And they're like, no, we're not making any changes. Right. But the
Yeah.
CISO is the one that's going to the board and saying, here's what the risk is. And they'll be the first one fired when things go wrong.
Agreed. Being that still today the primary reporting structure is CISO to CIO, right? That being there, I think most wise, seasoned CIOs get it and empower that CISO, and it's like, this is why you're here, dude. You're the security guy. I'm not. However, here's my environment, which is the reason why you're here. Understanding that support system is going to be critical. Understanding that, first of all, without, and that's what I think that's what the problem is sometimes, is that self-elevation of cybersecurity. Hey, we're super important.
Yeah.
We're short manned, and we command these salaries, and we have a skill shortage, and without cybersecurity, you can't go anywhere. You have to have cyber. Okay, but without IT, there is no cybersecurity to begin with. So understanding that support function, that and even taking it higher, understanding that you're there for the business, IT exists for the business, and cybersecurity exists for IT. Understanding that relationship allows people to remain in their lanes and support each other and sort of get out of the way. in the way that it should be, right? Again, a CISO not getting top cover for enforcing and making decisions that will shift the security posture of the company is probably going to be in the wrong place. I mean, that can only go on, for so long. You can only massage a CISO for so long, like, hey, sit back, let me do my thing. We have quotas to meet. We have to. No, like no, I can't live in my own skin, understanding that I can't execute the job I have, that you brought me in at a at a level one security posture, and you want me to take you to a 3 in 24 months. I need to be able to break some eggs here. I need to be able to shift some things around. Um, Across all, the typical three, people, process, technology. I think that's what it is that alignment, right? If a CIO still wants to continue to own everything and be empowered in that way, then you think you need a CISO, but you don't.
So let me ask you lessons from history on something like this. You worked at Lowe's, and you probably remember the Target breach. It was talked about so much. Did the industry change a little bit because of that, of what took place there, or did you see that in retail at all? Was
It
it?
changed a lot, changed entirely. It changed our budget. It changed our headcount. I was there when it happened. Yeah, it shifted everything. It's unfortunate that it had to happen, because nowadays we're so desensitized, and it's almost like a breach becomes the cause for a budget increase. But yeah, I was there. It was a massive shift in the way security was seen, the way that we were looked at. Suddenly, we had a platform. There was more quarterly training and all that good stuff for newcomers and all that. So changed everything entirely.
Did one of the things at Target, apparently, I don't know anybody at that company, and this is just from what the public information is, that in their SOC, they were getting alarm bells, but people actually chose to ignore them. Apparently that happened. Um, has there, I guess, been a change in the way we manage SOC fatigue? Because I gotta believe that's what came into play. At a place like Target, you would get alarm bells every second of some kind, right? Eh,
Yeah, I don't think it's I think we're far from eradicating SOC fatigue. I think we're far from it. I
Well,
think
that's an honest
people and
answer.
yeah, I mean, I think people enforce their SOC capabilities. Actually, Lowe's didn't have a SOC before, and
Okay.
started implementing one after, right, shortly after, within 2 years after. Um, and I hope I don't think that's intellectual property by any means, but it started after. I think that people started enhancing their SOC capabilities, but the fatigue is still there, right? Because again, you have a specifically skilled people working in a high pace environment, and it's almost like, I don't want to say that they're not replaceable, but you lean heavily on those folks that have had the training, have had the exposure, that put in the hours, and that commitment becomes deeper and deeper throughout time, and there's less of those people to go around. Hence what I said earlier about the success of MSSPs nowadays, right? Being able to leverage one centralized team that's looking at one screen, um, and is able to leverage lessons learned for, to spread across for everybody else. So yeah, the fatigue is still, I think the fatigue is still there. In fact, it's increased because now we have more tools and more screens to look at.
We do. We have many more tools and many more screens. And I think you talked about knowing the environment quite a bit, or you mentioned it at least a half a dozen times. I think that is critical to, if you the SOC can't understand the environment, uh, they're going to be tired, right? But it
Agreed.
also it gets into something that you briefly mentioned, was third party risk. At the on the Target breach, it was an HVAC contractor, right? Now, how, you look at companies, they have contractors of various sizes and various maturity. how can you possibly box in that third party risk? Because you need those vendors. You need the guy that's changing your light bulbs just as much as you need the guy that's updating the software on your point of sale equipment. So two different worlds, two different maturities altogether. Um, how do you balance third party risk here?
I used to have a boss at Lowe's, and when consultants would approach him, like they found something, like, ha, gotcha, this vendor's trying to do, he would throw his hands up, he'd sit there and say, what's the risk? And he's like, I'm not being for shit. Like honestly, what is, just tell me, convince me, right? As a regular, what is the risk, right? And sometimes we're trying to play such devil's advocates that we create risks that aren't really there. The potential isn't there. It's not going to happen. It's not the type of data. The exposure isn't there. I think it's getting down to that, right? What is really critical? What can we really afford to lose? Um, because, like you said, we can't cast the net wide enough to perform a rigorous, diligent 100 question assessment on every vendor. So you
Right.
better get critical, and you better get laser focused on what matters. You can have the mentality to ask the right questions, think like that adversary, but ultimately think, okay, great. If this landed at a competitor's doorstep, what is the impact really? Is there really a risk, right? The company that comes over and cleans our windows is a third party risk. And you have to think, this guy's hanging from an 80-foot story, whatever. He's going to look in and see a screen. Did he sign an NDA? And you can get into that, right? Or you could just say, actually, when the windows are being cleaned, we can just put the blinds down. You see, so again, I think it's down to that. It's creating that structure. First of all, you have to have good data classification in place, right? To know what you're giving who, what is what, and how do you assess each. But again, it's just categorizing and say, start with really heavy buckets. This is no kidding forecast pre-sales data that's being given to this vendor. Yes, assess entirely. Bring out the white glove, everything, right? These people create flyers for us for already agreed on public pricing. Okay, great. Are they given anything critical? No. Do they have access? Asking those questions, because you really can't devote the time to those vendors that don't have access, that aren't dealing with sensitive data and that sort of thing. When it comes to small companies passing that assessment and getting through, well, again, it's going to come down to the same thing. How risky is it to the company? How niche is that service that company's providing? Because trust me, a company like Lowe's, if it's super niche and it's this cutting edge technology, and it's two teenagers in a garage that developed it for whatever that may be, right? For
Yeah.
for whatever social media rendering, whatever that may be, they're not gonna those two teenagers are not gonna have policies in place. They don't have DOP. They don't have endpoint
They don't.
protection. They don't have any of that. But the technology is so niche that Lowe's says, I will assume the risk. I got to get my hands on that because somebody else will, and I'll meet them halfway. We'll get them secure. That sort of thing. So it's that balance from both sides, right?
Which brings us to zero trust and SASE. One of my favorite, because there's an ongoing debate out there. What are you ascribing to? Are you a zero trust, or do you go the SASE route, or what? Give us some thoughts as a professional CISO.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people
Yeah.
immediately cringe when you say zero trust. People
I
cringe
saw
because they
that,
think it's
and
a
I'm sure
fad.
people will see that expression on the podcast too.
Yeah, because they think it's a fad and everything else. But no, no. I have many clients who are leaning heavily towards zero trust and are implementing SASE technologies. The first thing to acknowledge is possibly neither one of those things is a tool. There are tools that greatly contribute to the achievement of SASE or zero trust, but
Yeah.
both of those are definitely a long-term strategy, long-term shift, and sort of abandoning legacy solutions. With our remote workforce, you have to lean into SASE, but it's not SASE versus zero trust. I think it's SASE and zero trust. Zero trust contributes to a SASE architecture. right? That's the way I see it, because it's not just protecting end user devices, right? And it's not
Yep.
just the identity, right? It's the network, it's the data, and that's why I believe those will go hand in hand. Um, Aiming to put in a tool in place without the strategy will have you fail every time, and will have you believe it is just a buzzword. We've been struggling with this for 2 years. Starting with the why and putting together the strategy not only will give you better odds of winning, but will also position you in a way where vendors won't BS you, because you know what the heavy lifting looks like for your particular environment. For them to tell you this will solve all your problems, you'll be zero trust overnight, sort of thing.
You know what? I'm smiling because you said it and not me. When I say it, nobody believes me. As an MSSP, we're like, you're saying that for your own self-serving needs. Like, nope, you heard it from a real CISO. So, like that's fantastic. And when it comes to failure, I guess one thing is, should companies be afraid to fail? Can in some areas, can't failure be used as a great asset as to building a giantly successful cybersec program?
Yeah, I remember writing a post years ago about that, about saying, is a breach a the most significant failure for a CISO, or does it represent a new budget? Right? Because suddenly now it's like it's almost like, welcome to the band of brothers. You two have been breached. Here's your new budget, so it doesn't happen again. Right? We're gonna mend your wounds, kind of thing. And it's still both ways. Failure could be so detrimental to where your negligence comes through loudly. You've been warned. You could have done the right thing, and you just didn't act on it for whatever reason. And then it's a career ending move, event that has happened to you. Um, what I believe is this: I think it's not. It's, again, it sounds cliche, but it's not a matter of if but when. We are going to fail in some capacity. There's
Yes.
there's the thing you least expect is going to get you, right. Vulnerability management is the oldest discipline in cybersecurity, right? People were scanning for vulnerabilities before we had antivirus, and it is still the one thing that gets us. So things are going to happen, like you said. Our user base, highly skilled to just got out of college, kind of thing, and they're accessing the same environment with the same access rights, and all that stuff. So um, failure is going to happen. How do you plan for it? And how do you say, if all else fails, what does my disaster recovery look like? Right? Am I waiting for an actual breach to pull, ring the bell and exercise my incident response plan and that sort of thing? I think we need to be exercising a lot more than usual, and making things as realistic as possible, and not just like, oh, let's sit through this thing, like, you're doing the military. Let's sit through this exercise. Okay, Kathy, are you here? Okay, ring the bell. Okay, guy breaks in through the back window. Blah, blah, blah. What do you do? Okay, answer. We have to get realistic. We have to get intentional, about this.
Yeah, that's sage advice. That's really, really good advice. I think if people looked at that in a very practical context, they could really secure their organizations. There's some companies out there that have really leveraged something catastrophic, and really leverage that as an opportunity to establish that awareness that we were talking about a little bit earlier, and creating that culture of awareness. That doesn't mean that they're not vulnerable. There's always going to be vulnerabilities. There will always be. If you're a determined enough bad actor, you might find something that you're going to take advantage of, but it'll be really hard, and your time might be better spent elsewhere with someone that's a lot less secure. And I guess that's a point that companies need to think about, is, how much do you really invest in this? Can you get, if your risk level gets down to a point where it's acceptable for you, then you're good. You've done the best you could. You've optimized the whole.
Agreed. Agreed. I think that at times when companies, are assessed and they realize where they sit in that maturity level, becomes overwhelming. And rather than doing something, they do nothing. Right. So they come up with a list of 20 initiatives, and it's like, and it's just overwhelming. Where do we start? And in that planning and that selection, like I said, the too many options. It's like, okay, what do we do first? Is it network segmentation? Is it EDR? Is it? And they don't pull the trigger. You start somewhere and you'll get to the other one after. When people enter cybersecurity, they're like, I don't know what I should get certified in. I don't know what I should be reading. Should I be learning about cloud security? Should I be learning about identity? And they don't pull the trigger. If you said, you know what, in the next year, I'm going to learn something new each month, regardless of what had happened or whether you were caught, off guard and you didn't know that one thing, right? Oh, see, went to this meeting. I knew nothing about that. That's what I didn't learn. No, just stay on your course, trust the process. And at the end of the 12 months, you have had your failures, you have had your embarrassments, you have missed the ball on certain things that you didn't know, but you'll look back and you say, you know, this was my approach. I couldn't predict what was coming at me, but at the end of these 12 months, I learned 12 new technologies, 12 new initiatives, 12 new things. And that's what it is. Companies, once they're assessed, once they acknowledge what the deficiencies are, let's take these on. Let's start at number one. And to be able to look back, regardless of what happens in between.
And you know what? Since you're a motivational speaker as well, I want to bring that down to the personal level. So, how do you avoid the victim's mentality? So, you failed. So, we just talked about corporate failure, but as an individual, you failed. How are you not the victim? Because that's the easiest role to take a hold of in that situation. Well, it wasn't my fault. It's
Yeah,
always me. Hate to put you on the spot, but
I think it's understanding that if we say, you know what, things if we say life isn't fair and things can happen to you anyway, then you have to believe that it didn't happen to you, but it happened for you, right? When you are on an airplane and your flight gets canceled, you are thinking, I knew it. This is the one time I decided to take a vacation. And
yeah.
you're not acknowledging there's 200 other people sitting in there with you. And all you can focus on is you, right? I guarantee you, someone else is flying with a problem that you wouldn't want to switch places with. You're going so believing that things are going to happen anyway and they happen for you. It's that's what keeps me resilient. So it's like the absence of trouble means I'm not out there. I'm not going out there, right? The only way I won't get hit by a car, I won't it's not driving, it's staying home. But what good of a life is that, right? Not experiencing anything. So going if you're out there, it means if you're failing, it means you're out there. You're doing the thing which you can fail at. I that's probably the simplest way I can put it.
That's a very, very good answer and great advice. And which brings us actually to the hour here. And I want to give you the floor for the last 2 minutes to talk about anything you'd like to. So any books, any events, any shows, any appearances, whatever you'd like our audience to know, whatever you'd like to plug, please.
No, no, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a privilege that you get to do these and to be handpicked and selected to be a guest on your podcast. I love it. Awesome. Love what you're doing. The questions were phenomenal. If anything, I would like to just express to people. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina area. If I create a video about something that's inspirational to you and encouraging, reach out, connect. I'd be glad to help you through that. I only talk about things that I've experienced myself, that I've gone through or overcome myself. So it's not just like, oh, neat quote today, let's talk about this. It's real things. I'd also like to acknowledge that any strength that I found in my life has been, through faith, my spouse, great mentors. There's people in the industry that I consider mentors: Christopher Zell, Anthony Johnson. Just those two come to mind. Have been very,
Oh wow,
very
Chris Self,
significant.
formerly Wendy's CISO,
Yes,
right?
yes.
He's a
Those
big
two
into
men, yeah,
biohacking. I
yeah,
had a
yeah,
little chat.
yes, huge. Yeah, so those two gentlemen, there's a lot more out there, but those two gentlemen immediately come to mind as having helped me shift a lot of my mindset in cyber and in life.
Brilliant. Well, with that, Rafael, thank you so much for being on this show. It was a pleasure, and hope people find a lot of encouragement. And the audience, send us your feedback. Let us know what you thought, good, bad, indifferent. We're always looking for feedback. Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a great day.